to get children to behave good before the outburst happens, before, like, how to prevent those from happening, how to make sure that the power struggle is not as often, as frequent, as intense, that the meltdown, the tantrum is not as often, as frequent, as intense. All that is possible with preventative discipline. I'm not holding anything back. As a certified parenting coach, certified in positive discipline, I'm going to show you on this podcast episode of the Parenting with Understanding podcast everything I know to correct behavior before it even happens through preventative discipline. Hello, my name is Marcela Collier. I am your host. I have served 14,151 clients in HIC Parenting Education, break free from reactivity, bring peace to their parenting, and raise their children with confidence, peace, and accountability. And I'm going to show you every tool I know, every preventative positive discipline tool I know to prevent most power struggles and most tantrums. Before we go there, if you've been listening to the Parenting with Understanding podcast for a little bit, would you leave us a positive review? Just open the description of the podcast episode and leave us a 5-star positive review and subscribe to our podcast. If you can subscribe on YouTube, the Parenting with Understanding podcast, or in your podcast feed, search the Parenting with Understanding podcast and you can subscribe there. Okay, so let's go to this week's episode. Okay, so let's talk about preventative discipline, which is basically how to get that positive behavior that we want to see and not having to deal with the outburst and the tantrum and the pushback and the power struggle all the time. This is done through preventative discipline. So what is preventative discipline? Preventative discipline is anticipating our children's triggers or things they struggle with, skills they struggle with, preparing them with strategies and with coping skills to address or face those triggers and those situations in a smoother way. Preventative discipline is way more effective than corrective discipline. We want to prevent more than correct. We want to be more proactive than reactive. Discipline, a lot of people tell me, what is the consequence for this? What is the consequence for that? And then I think it's so much easier to think about, how can I prevent this tantrum in the future? How can I help my child be successful with peer interaction in the future? That's a lot easier route than just thinking, what do I do when they hit? What do I do when they don't share? What do I do when they have a tantrum? And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So, what are triggers? Triggers are situations that initiate or spark up our children's needs. What is this, Marcela? Let's go little by little. So let's just say that your children are having separation anxiety. The moment that you say goodnight, that need for connection and that feeling of separation anxiety starts. So that's a trigger, the good night, their goodbye. What is your child's trigger? Let me know in the comments, what is your child's biggest trigger? So there are 3 kinds of triggers, and it's important, very important for you to be clear about what they are in order to apply preventative discipline correctly or effectively. So a direct trigger is the right now event. What's happening at the moment is what's stirring up my child's feelings and needs. The example was the bedtime separation anxiety. When it comes to direct triggers, these are easier to see. It's what happened at the moment. But what about the other 2 types of triggers? indirect triggers and trauma triggers. These are usually a lot trickier to see. And when they happen, many times parents say things like this. It just happens all of a sudden. All of a sudden, my child started biting. Or all of a sudden, my child started doing ABC. Or they just lie with no reason. They just lie. They might be facing indirect or trauma triggers that are a lot sneakier to see. So what are indirect triggers? Those are the ones that happen from carried out stress from something that happened in the past. It could have been 10 minutes ago. It could have been yesterday. It could have been earlier in the week that created anxiety or stress, and then the child carried it over to the next part of the day, the next situation. I was taking my twins towards their preschool. That was years ago. And in the parking lot, I noticed a mom was trying to get her child off the car to go to preschool. What happened? The mom felt like I could tell that she was anxious or something was going on with her and she was yelling. Well, nothing happened at that moment. She dropped her kid off. I dropped my twins off. When I picked my twins up in the afternoon, I overheard one of the teachers telling the mom that the child was having a really rough time throughout the day, that he was hitting kids, that he was biting stuff, that he was just aggressive. Okay, so could the mom's energy be an indirect trigger to what happened in daycare? Possibly yes, possibly no. There might be another reason, but this could be an indirect trigger. This could be an indirect trigger. When children carry out stress from past interactions, and then they do things that don't make sense. Has that happened to you? Like, where is this coming from? So dig a little deeper. What happened earlier? What is going to happen in the future as well? Indirect triggers could happen regarding anxiety of what's going to happen in the future. My son, we were going to summer camp. He was not getting ready. He was not getting ready. He was not getting ready. Sure enough, he had an indirect trigger. He was anxious about movie day. That day was movie day, and him having autism and ADHD, he was anticipating his sensory anxiety. And then the last kind of trigger is trauma trigger. A trauma trigger is a kind of indirect trigger, but more long-term. So let's just imagine a child who's been spanked in his life. And now he's at the playground. And then let's just say that he got into a little back and forth with another kid over a swing. Let's just say that the other kid slightly pushed him down. And then this child who's been spanked gets a quick recall of what it feels to be physically strained, physically, hurt. And then he goes back and then responds in a very, very aggressive, over the board, not proportionate to what happened way. So that's the example of a direct, indirect, and trauma trigger. Why is it so important for us to understand our children's triggers when it comes to preventing misbehavior? And I put it in quotes because I don't really believe in misbehavior. Children behave because they have needs and feelings. But for the sake of understanding, misbehavior happens because there are feelings, and there are feelings because there is a need. So if we are able to understand our children's common triggers, we can anticipate the misbehavior and prepare our children for what happens next or to be successful in the future. When I discovered that my son was anxious about movie day, I prepare him beforehand. And I said, okay, son, what can you do when you get anxious? Well, there is a craft room. I can retrieve there. Okay, great. He had no problem that day at summer camp. Possibly, I would have gotten reports from the teacher if I didn't prepare him for that trigger beforehand. He gets a little bouncy, disruptive when he's sensory triggered, but because he had a plan, because I used preventative discipline, the behavior was corrected before it even happened. So, do you see how when we have a clear understanding of our children's triggers, we can help them plan with strategies. We can help them plan with skills so they are more successful when they feel those feelings, when they have those feelings, when they're faced with that triggering situation. That's preventative discipline. That's how we get our children to behave good before anything even happens. Now, our own triggers and our own reactions stir up our children's. If we are secure parents, most of the time, our children are more successful at dealing with their own triggers. But if we are not able to deal with our own and we show it through our own reactivity, that's the model that they see. And if you are there, give yourself a lot of empathy and grace. It's not easy to respond in a secure way when we did not have a model growing up. Now, the beautiful opportunity that you have is that you are here listening to the Parenting with Understanding podcast, and you are being guided by a certified parenting coach who created a free class with 4 simple steps to help you break free from that reactivity so you can bring peace to your parenting and start raising secure children with peace and accountability. This free class, you can find it on my website, hicparenting.com, hicparenting.com, where I'm going to leave a card up here if you are watching this episode from YouTube, or if you are one of our members of the parenting of the Secure Parent Collective, you will find this link in the description below of this video as well. If you are watching this podcast episode from YouTube, you can find it in the link in the description box as well. If you're a member of our private community, you find it below this video in the community chat. Okay, so let's keep talking about preventative discipline. Let me give you examples. Like, Marcela, I kind of get the idea, but what about if I have a younger toddler? What about if I have an older kid? What about if I have a teen? So let's keep unraveling how to get our children to behave good with preventative discipline. Before I give you the example, I want us to be very clear that discipline is basically helping children solve their problem. It's not having them pay for having a problem, it's helping them solve their problems. And preventative discipline is helping them solve their problems in advance, before the problem happens. So, my teenager, he's not a teen anymore, he's an adult, but when he was a teen, he was needing help, still needy, unorganized in the bathroom. Every day he loved his hair. He loved his hair so much. And he used to spend hours in the bathroom doing his hair every single day. He has ADHD, so because he has an executive functioning disorder, it's hard for him to manage his time versus tasks. So many times I noticed that he was still trying to get ready while the school bus came to pick him up. Many times he left running to the door with the shoes in his hand, And then I was thinking, how can I help him through preventative discipline? How can I set him up for success next time the bus comes? So I started analyzing with him. When you have older kids, you can develop preventative discipline strategies with them. Matter of fact, I recommend you to do it with them, because when they're invested in something, they're more willing to achieve it on their own. So we sat down and I said, son, I notice that every day that the school bus comes, the lady needs to wait for you 5 minutes. That's not fair to them, because they're going to get late to school because of you. And it's stressful for you, waiting, like knowing that the school bus is just waiting right out the door, and you run out the house. Many times you forget things. Your shoes are in your hands. You're holding your shoes in your hands. How can I make this a lot easier for you? Let's think about the things that take the most time for you. And then we talked about the bathroom time. Well, you don't take long showering, but it's the getting yourself ready, combing your hair, getting your hair ready. I don't know what, like you spend 20 minutes doing your hair. I don't know what's all the things that you do, but you do. Yeah, mom, my hair needs to be perfect, whatever. I'm like, okay, I understand. But what can we set up so it doesn't take long? What's part of the hair routine that takes you so long? He said, well, sometimes I cannot find my leave-in conditioner, and then I don't know where my comb is, and then I have to pick up all the hair on the sink, and then it's getting late. I'm like, okay, so it sounds like getting your things ready and making cleanup easy will speed up the time. So we set up a hair basket right on his sink. You have everything there on that basket. As you use the products, you put them back in there. And to reduce the cleanup, the sink time, we came up with the idea of putting not a garbage bag, but a grocery bag on the sink. So as he was combing his hair, he could put his hair, he lost not a lot of hair, but he has curly hair, and people with curly hair, if you have it, you might relate to this. Me too. We lose a lot of hair when we comb our hair. So we came up with a strategy of, like, the hair that you lose, you put it in the little bag. So when you're done, you just take the bag, put it in the garbage, and you're done. It reduced his getting ready time so much. And he was borderline to the time that he needed to be picked up, but he was not going out the door with the shoes in his hand. That's an example of preventative discipline. It's not about complaining to our kids, hey, you need to get ready on time. If you don't get ready on time, then you're going to have this and this consequence. That's not preventative discipline. That's a warning that many times we just add to the anxiety, because children literally need time to strategize on how to be successful. Preventative discipline is troubleshooting with them to make up a plan that works for their needs. That's how we get our children to behave good and prevent quote-unquote misbehavior, outbursts, power struggles, whatever situation, before it even happens. It makes the current challenges a lot easier. There is another way, another positive preventative discipline strategy that I use a lot, especially with my autistic son. If you have autistic kids, or if you have neurodivergent kids, this is a big one that you can start applying to get good behavior fast. And it is transitional activities. Children, especially neurodivergent kids, may struggle a lot with day-to-day tasks, or not day-to-day tasks, but with tasks that may not put in the red zone to a neurotypical child. Dentist is one for my autistic son. He used to have a lot of meltdowns, and then now he kind of gets very bouncy before we go to the dentist. But then I started thinking, how can I reduce sensory anxiety, because that's really what it is, that behavior of the meltdown, the touching everything and bounciness. How can I meet his needs so that behavior is corrected before it happens? We were going for a cleaning, and then I was just thinking, I'm like, I wonder if he gets to play a little bit, or maybe not play, but get familiar with the tools before they go to his mouth, if that would help. Well, I put it out there. When the doctor came, he's a very nice doctor. I said, hey, my son is autistic. Would it be okay if maybe you let him feel the tools on his finger before you put in his mouth? He said, oh yeah, for sure. No problem. Then he did so. He put the tools, I don't know how you call the thing that goes, the fresa, I don't know how you say in English, but he put it on his finger, and then he put it on his other finger, and he said, okay, Santi, tell me when you're ready to put it in the mouth. And that was it. He hasn't had a meltdown in a long time. He doesn't need that anymore. He's 9 years old now, but it did for sure help them. So that's a transitional activity, to ease your children towards stressful activities or activities that they don't enjoy, little by little. I did foster care for 10 years, and I remember one of my children in foster care, she didn't like bath. Bath time was a hard thing for her. I don't know, it could be a trauma trigger. I did not really know why it was so hard for her. So instead of like, you need to get in the bath right now, I use a transitional activity. I remember one day I said, okay, so how can we make this a lot easier? And then we filled up water balloons, and then we put them in there. And then I just had her play with the water balloons that were floating on the bathtub for a little bit. And then I said, okay, let's put one finger in, let's put one toe in. And the least I knew it, she was in the bathtub. And then we finished it. So that's a transitional activity. Marcela, but I'm rushing in the morning, so I might have to just come up with fun things. I want to tell you something that I tell my clients, and this is a hard truth. As parents, need to we spend our time with our kids regardless. So we have to choose. Do we spend it in power struggles, or we spend it in helping them, meeting their needs, helping them ease through transitions, and making things a lot more fun and easier for them? Either way, you're spending your time. You just need to choose if you're going to spend it in a power struggle and meltdown, or in making things fun, easier, transitional activities, using preventative discipline. Remember that discipline is not having children pay for having a problem, is helping them solve their problems. So children always respond best to action steps instead of lectures. They do. They do. It works a lot easier for them to hear action steps than a big lecture of why they need to eat their food, because there are a lot of kids in Africa who are not eating. I think that was the Latinos sermon that I heard from my mom every day. So it's the action steps. The action steps. How can we, Santi, Santi is my autistic son. How can we try new foods? Do you have an idea? And then he told me, well, those carrots are too big. I'm like, if we cut it in strips, will it help? He said, okay, I cut it in strips. He said, they're not thin enough. He has a lot of sensory needs, a lot. So I cut it even thinner. And he gave it a try. So again, you either spend the time in the power struggle or begging them or strategizing with them. Either way, you're going to spend your time. So that's an action step. Children respond best to action steps than lectures. Let's talk about routine and discipline and how to apply preventative discipline when it comes to this. So preventative discipline is understanding how to set up the environment and our children's routine in a way that suits them, that suit their needs. I am not a morning person at all. I wake up at 6 every single day, but I kind of need my time to drink my fiber, kind of like settle down. I need to have a little time before I work out. My husband said, you know what, Marcela, if you wake up and exercise right away, you're going to feel so much energized and you don't have to convince yourself about working out. He's a morning person and that works for him. I gave it a try. And the next day as soon as I got up, I worked out and I felt terrible the rest of the day. I felt cranky. It did not work out for me. Why am I telling you this? Because with our kids, we're kind of the same way. We try to adjust their daily routine to what's convenient for us without reading them. The perfect bedtime routine that you read online of read a book, lower the lights, go to bed, like everything is very mellow and slow, might not work for your sensory seeking, rambunctious child. I say it because I have one, rambunctious, hyper, silly, sensory seeker. He needs more to settle down. He needs deep pressure. He needs to swing. He needs to rock. He needs to jump. He needs more energetic activity to settle down. So it's not about what the book says. It's about reading our children and anticipating how they would adjust best to that part of the routine. That's preventative discipline. Preventative discipline, again, is anticipating our children's triggers or what's hard for them and making it in a way that is a lot lighter, easier, developing skills in them so they are set up for success in the future, helping them meet their needs. That's how you get them to listen to you in advance and preventing power struggles and meltdowns, etc. If you are a member of my private community, I encourage you to come to our next class. Is going to be every Thursday at 9 a.m. PST. We gather up as a community in the Secure Parent Collective to help one another, and you have me there and you have other coaches there to provide you with support. If this podcast episode gave you inspiration, transformation, would you share it with a friend? Just share it right now, send it to them, and remember that it only takes understanding of yourself and of your children's needs to raise secure children.